Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So excited to have you all here with me on our third installment, sharing my screen now of the Engagement Lab. And then on this webinar, we're going to be going through the high performance without the fallout. We got a lot of really fun things to go over. Really excited about everything that we're going to cover in this call. We've been talking a lot about engagement and performance and how to tie it all together. And this one, we're going to have a lot of great stats and things you can do right off the gate. But I'd love to hear where everyone is calling in from. So in the chat, please share where are you calling in from. I'd love to also hear what is your favorite morning beverage? What do you like to drink when you get up? I'm a 8-ounce Americano kind of guy, but sometimes a dry cap is nice. I've been reading, there's some interesting drinks coming out. Matcha espresso fusion. I know a lot of people are drinking dirty chai, which is espresso plus chai. Just a lot of hot coffee, orange juice. That's a good one. I love fresh juice, right? Just nothing better than fresh orange juice. I love it. All right. Well, y'all, nice to see you. Dirty chai for sure. Oat milk on the darker side with coffee from Steve. Calgary, I was just there a couple weeks ago. Beautiful. The mountain ranges, incredible. So thanks for all coming. Remember for coming, and let's jump into it. Mocha at Starbucks, I love it. Dark roast, of course. Yeah, the world comes together when it comes to coffee and tea. Let's get going. We have a lot to cover in this call. So what we're going to cover is 6 major parts here. So we're going to right off the gate. So basically this PowerPoint, this presentation, we're going to share it with you, and you can just take this and just show it right to your managers, right? This is a manager training guide to, this is what I'm really passionate about. And we'll talk a little bit more about me in a second, but just, being able to just tweak the knobs and being able to create a high valued, high performing team. So we can just talk about quickly right off the gate a few things you can do as managers or as teammates to plan your week intentionally. Then we're going to talk about performance, high performance teams, some things we can do around radical prioritization. Psychological safety is a huge one, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. And then how to set up guardrails, how to say no, right? And then a number of best practices around recognition, effort equity, and also recovery. So a little bit about me. I'm Alex Grandy. Thanks for joining. I'm the CEO of RecognizeApp.com. I'm the founder of that. I'm super passionate about psychology, organizational development, motivation, gamification theory. So these are things I care about and I design into my program, which maybe I'll show a little bit in this call. So that's a little bit about me and why I care about this topic. So right out the gate, like I said, what are things that managers can do immediately that can make an impact? So we've all heard about the team huddles. What about an async, right? So it's 5 minutes Monday, 5 minutes Wednesday, 5 minutes on Friday, and you can be using tools like Geekbot or survey tools, or even just messaging into a Microsoft Teams channel. What's happening? What are your goals of the week? How's it going? What'd you accomplish, right? And so it takes 5 minutes each session for each employee. So they spend 15 minutes. And then in total, the manager should be able to read it in 5 minutes as well, 15 minutes a week, right? We can cut out the hour-long huddles, right, on a daily basis. And then, one thing you can do right out the gate is every week, are we on track with priorities? And have that be a ritual, right? So you put that into the calendar, you can have it be free so people can book on top of it. Nothing more frustrating than going and looking at someone's calendar and they're completely booked up with things like walking the dog and planning goals. So leave things open and free. And then we're going to talk more about how to make trade-offs and also how to schedule those cool downs. So being able to have those periods where we're not constantly hyper-focused on productivity. We're only human, and we're going to talk more about that. So that's kind of the next topic here is, the high performance and how to be high performant teams and how it can be at times a paradox. But we have some polls for y'all. So Rue, you want to pull that up? Love to get some feedback from the group around your leadership. So the last word is performance, because it looks like I got cut off. But yeah, so how much does your leadership care about performance? I talk to HR professionals on a weekly basis, having these kinds of interviews, learning more about them, sharing any help I can. But I often hear, well, what keeps your leadership up at night? What keeps your leadership up at night? And it's performance. So, and that could be performance of retaining top employees, right? The retention of your most productive employees. How do you retain those? So it looks like, let's go ahead and publish the results, Brew, if we can. We'll move on to the next one, but it looks like somewhat is equal with the care. It's all they talk about. So I think this is huge. This is a huge topic, is performance. Half the group says all they talk about. Nobody said not at all. So let's see what Tiffany said here. They care about performance, but not managing performance, right? Well, that's where we can come in and we can help them out with that. But I definitely hear you on that, where proof is in the pudding, and are they willing to put dollars behind certain initiatives, and that can be a challenge. Let's do the second poll here, which is, what is important to leadership on performance, right? And I think this can help us a little bit more dive down into how to convince them on certain initiatives. Don't want to sway it, but it looks like we have a pretty clear winner here. They're all winners, but one is more important to the group than others. All right, let's keep going. So, Ru, if you want to end that poll, we can show what people said here. So, yeah, 50%, almost 50%, 48% retention of high performers. So, how do we retain those top performers? If you have high performers, at some point on LinkedIn, they're going to get a message from a recruiter. They're going to be offering them more money, right? And if they're not valued, seen, and heard in the organization, they're going to walk. So one of the problems with that is being burnt out, right? So let's talk a little bit more about how to combat that. So I think there's this myth, right, where pressure creates diamonds, but too much pressure creates dust. So with that being said, we want to find that balancing act where we are being productive, and we're celebrating our successes in a way that doesn't lead to burnout. So you want that yin and yang. And so how do you talk about that with leadership? Again, we're going to provide this PowerPoint. You can download it. This presentation, it has links to the data. Often people say, where's that stat come from? Right? So but on average, $4,700 cost to hire a new employee. Then I think we all know it can take 3 to 8 months to ramp up new staff and get them fully productive. And then the kind of most telling one to me, and I touched on that earlier about recruiters on LinkedIn, is people who are burned out are 2.8%, 2.8 times, so 280 times, or 280% rather, more likely to look for a new job, right? So that's twice, almost 3 times, is likely. That's a very telling stat that really kind of strikes the fear in the hearts of leaders more than the other ones. Because $5,000 isn't drastic for most leaders. Everyone knows that there's going to be a ramp up time, but knowing that your high performers are looking for, high performers who are burned out are looking for new jobs and taking those calls is should be concerning. So, we want to talk a little bit about what is high performance here. So it's often used in the development world is this idea of velocity. So essentially that's kind of like how much effort is being put in and what is being delivered. It's the speed and quality of the output, right? If you think about, voltage and amps. So voltage is how quickly electricity is moving, and the amps, how much can be moving at one time, right? So if you multiply those, it's watts. So it's like, what's the watts of the organization? You don't want your lights blink, coming on and off, because there's more and more watts and less, right? You want it to be sustainable, which is the other component to high performance, right? And that's the part where we don't make that diamond turn into dust, is by creating sustainability in your engagement strategy, while still maintaining that velocity, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's the best way to be thinking about this type of work that we're doing as managers, right? And so to get there, we're going to talk about how to get there. Now that we understand it's a problem, we saw that half the group says that the retention of high performers is so important, so we cannot burn those people out. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, it's prioritization is so critical. I think a lot of what we do it makes a huge meaning and huge impact. It's the little things that lead to big things, and that's that 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, right? So I almost think of it as a 90-10 rule, where 10% of what you do leads to 90% of your success, but you have to do 10 things to get to that one thing. So it's a bit of a paradox there. But we look at the things that we're doing that are actually causing problems. It's really easy to cut those things out. So then it's more likely then you're getting to 80-20, right? Or 70-30, right? And where you can do more things and then it leads to more successes. So for instance, 71% of senior managers say that meetings are unproductive. 60% of workers say that they lack uninterrupted focus time, right? These are things that we can fix right off the bat by stopping allowing ourselves to be always available. I think the Microsoft Teams Slack world now has made us that we're constantly on. You are allowed to disconnect. That should be part of the culture. And we're going to talk about psychological safety and the idea of being safe, to feel comfortable turning off Slack, right? And we'll talk about how managers can mimic that behavior. But I want you to think about what are the biggest things that are causing bottlenecks in your organization that you can actually stop doing. Maybe oftentimes it's not adding another wellness program to improve culture. It's actually creating an employee experience that is fluid and can flow and allows for people to be authentic. I think it's a good phrase to be able to say "not now," or even just say it to yourself. Recently I publicly said, "Hey, we need to do this thing," and then because it's not everyone's in the same office. Some people are working without you knowing, and then suddenly you're getting pinged. Why is so and so working on such and such? We have to be able to have a FIFO system, right? First in, first out. We use Kanbans in our Notion to have our wiki, right? So everyone has a way to see what is the ideas doing done, right? And when you get a new task, you put it into the ideas or the to-do before the doing is cleared up, right? And this works for people like myself with ADD and people who can focus. It's great to be able to keep organized in that way. And so teaching the team and actually showing that behavior of not now. And if you are strategic enough as a manager, you can get people to, instead of going directly to your teammates to do work, they're going through you. You are the filter to be able to be that shield, right? To cut out those low value requests or look at ways to basically remove those obstacles so that you can be working on those really exciting things. And that's why I want to touch on, it's a little blown out here, but it's the Eisenhower matrix, right? And so, President Eisenhower, he created a system where, do now when it's urgent and important, right? Burnout comes when we have to do urgent, not important things, right? Those are the things that can kill us. So if you can delegate them, you want to delegate those urgent, not important things, or at least put them into your to-do list and be pulling them out when you can. But you definitely want to, you don't need to do a lot, just a little bit, start small. What is something that you can eliminate, right? It's not urgent, not important, right? It could be a meeting. We'll talk more about how to have the courage to cut out a meeting later on in the webinar. But this is the Eisenhower matrix. It's good to know how that works. Again, we'll be sending these slides after the call. The next component, as I touched on earlier, is psychological safety, and this is a huge one. So at Google, they had a project and they analyzed for 2 years their staff. What created the highest performers? Is it the smartest people? What they found, it's actually psychological safety. I have a colleague who is very successful. He works for a partner in an agency, and he'd rather hire people from University of Texas than MIT, was his words. And so, and why is that? Well, I think maybe it has to do with grit or where they've come from, or what they expect to do next. But the smartest people aren't always the most productive, but we can always work with them to be as productive as possible with this system right here. So this pyramid does a great job explaining that the most important, the bedrock of your organization needs to be feeling safe, have an employee experience that allows that, as well as these other components as well as it goes up. So, this is a very interesting, diagram to consider, the Google's 5 dynamics for effective teams. And I want to share that with the group. In conscious leadership, there's this concept of above the line or below the line. And that's why I made this diagram like this, right? So is your organization above the line? It's a really easy analogy to think about it, right? In conscious leadership, above the line is a leader who doesn't gossip. They are there for you, right? All of the best principles around, being authentic and caring about people. And, that's kind of what we want to consider. Are we above the line in a safe culture where you have permission to fail, for instance, is one component of that. Can you have an honest discussion with your manager in a one-on-one and it doesn't lead to, backstabbing in the future, right? Does your manager take credit for what you do, right? These are all low safety cultures going below the line. So you want to be able to have a culture of experimentation where you're allowed to. If you can experiment in a company and you're allowed to do that, you're actually going to be celebrating successes because you'll actually be able to know between an A/B test which result led to the better result, right? So which variable led to more efficient processes, for instance. So experimentation and being allowed to fail can lead to success, right? And you want that kind of culture amongst your managers. So I think one-on-ones is a critical time to have. When I survey HR managers, a lot of times they tell me that their company does not have standards around one-on-ones, or they don't have any way of knowing if one-on-ones are being conducted effectively. You could be having a one-on-one just talking about the weather for an hour, right? And then is that really a good use of time compared to a manager that actually is talking about important things? Now, and also at the same time, you want to have it so that there's not blaming, right? It's, what's getting in your way? What do you need from me, right? How are you feeling about your workload? Or when you hire somebody, where do you want to go in your career, right? These are things that the manager should be asking their direct reports in these one-on-ones. And then also consider Slack. What should be allowed in Slack or Teams? What should be a phone call? You don't want a lot of back and forth, right? I think get on the phone, and that's why actually using ChatGPT or Gemini to teach empathy, right? Maybe you want to talk about something and it starts off with where are we at with that deadline, and then actually ChatGPT can make it more empathetic and help you guide you on that conversation. So I really encourage managers to take advantage of that. We are exploring interesting ideas around helping managers conduct one-on-ones, tying them into goals here at Recognize, how one-on-ones can then lead to, basically just an overview of that employee and where they're at, and really helping managers be more effective with those. So Ruth, can we pull up that poll for one-on-ones? Love to hear what people think about the idea of one-on-ones. Is this a topic that you care about? Is this something that you're looking to maybe provide as a standard process, right? As a third-party tool, or even connecting it on your own? Feel free to put it in the chat. But I'm just curious because we are exploring different ideas around manager trainings, one-on-ones, performance tools. So awesome. Yeah, we can end the poll. Thanks so much. Looks like a maybe is on the 70. And I love that 20%. Yes, definitely. So love to talk to you. I'd love to set up interviews with any of you. Put my email into the chat. Please email me. We'll try to reach out to you as well. And I'd love to talk to you more about how we can help you with that, because that is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially tied to goals and performance reviews and things like that, while still allowing these one-on-ones to have that psychological safety where you can talk about things freely without it being necessarily recorded, right? We don't want to necessarily record everything in one-on-ones, but we want to be there for our employees. So moving on to the next section, which is setting up guardrails, not just goals. So what does that mean? So again, you don't want to be below the line, right? We don't want to see things like even, yes, amongst your managers, but also your employees, right? We don't want withdrawal. We don't want cynicism. We don't want decreased quality, right? These are things to be thinking about and being aware of. Having company values around that. I know a lot of companies will have literally "don't be a jerk" as a company value. I don't think that's the best company value that you can come up with. I think there's some better ones out there. On our team, our value is ally. That's related to this. Are you being an ally, right? If you are withdrawing or decreasing quality, decreasing quality, that would be our other value, which is showing an exemplar, right? So you want to lead by an example. So you want to have quality work. But if you're being a jerk, if you're being negative consistently, if you're shutting down people's ideas, not being a yes and team player, then you're not being an ally, right? So once you define that in your whatever, however you want to write that, we also have a code of conduct that I've written that we live by in our team. No yelling policy, right? For instance. So once it's defined, it's easier for managers to talk about it. It's like, hey, remember our red lines. So what's going on here? How can I help? Right? It's the kind of conversation that we're looking for. And then when you write it down, it's consistent amongst all your managers. They're not guessing on, is withdrawal okay? Is camera off, muted okay? Future webinar, we're going to be talking about camera on, camera off etiquette. So look for that in the future. Okay, another thing I want to talk about, and I touched on it earlier, which is respecting logged off hours. Okay, we should respect this. If people are being productive, if they're delivering, you should, if you are checking to see if there's a green dot next to someone's name, you are already having a problem with that employee or that manager, right? You shouldn't have to even be worried about that. People should be allowed to log off and have that focus time. Remember, 16% said that they don't have any time to focus, and that's because it's all on. And you tell them, if you're going to log off, that means you need to put your phone away too. There's a lot of distractions, especially in the news, constantly, plus social media. You got to put that phone in a different room and you got to log off. So another thing is, allowing that focus time. I believe that calendar should stay free in case that you just end up having a full. I mean, you should look at your calendar once in a while and analyze whether or not you are capable of opening some time up. Because if nobody can find any time on your calendar, again, because your focus time and you're walking the dog, etc., that's not going to work. But that's why I like having free. I use free all the time. It's like preferred. You tell the team, I prefer that you don't schedule with me at this time, but if you have to, I'm available, especially for client calls. Awesome. Moving right along here. Another topic is to, again, I touched on it earlier again, modeling behavior, right? I love the schedule message tool. I work all kinds of different hours. Sometimes, like after this meeting, I'm literally going to go to the gym. We have a flexible schedule here at Recognize. I'm working at 9 p.m. because it's easy for me to do that. I started work at 5:30 today. It's fine, right? But I don't want to be messaging people at 9 p.m. I don't want to be texting people work questions, right? We keep everything within our communication tool. Along with that, schedule messages. Just schedule messages or send an email. If it's longer than 2 sentences, it shouldn't go into Slack. You should be emailing that. Use email again, all right? We've lost email. If you need to write a paragraph, maybe an email is better. Create that flow chart, how to be consistent across your organization. It's going to make a difference. All right, this is actually one of my parts I'm most excited about. It's the kind of the final chapter here. Best practices, a number of things that you can be doing as manager or as a company actually to improve culture. So let's talk a little bit about recognition, right? And by the way, tomorrow is Employee Appreciation Day for 2026. So hopefully you're doing something. If you're doing something awesome, put it in the chat. I want to hear what people are doing for Employee Appreciation Day. So I think we all have heard the Dan Pink autonomy, mastery, purpose for motivation, right? But with recognition, so the autonomy, growth, and visibility, right? So we want recognitions. We want these rewards to be public. So with Recognize with a platform, yes, you can send private recognition. especially for those recognitions that are worth maybe a significant amount of money. Maybe that's better to be private. But ideally, you have a recognition program that allows people to choose the rewards they want, how they want to recognize. It's in their workflow, it's accessible. You want a recognition program that allows growth opportunities. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit next. And then again, as I mentioned, it's visible and people have a voice. So anyone in the organization can send a recognition to someone. So I'm going to give a quick, I'm going to come back to the SAPS model. Let me get a quick overview. Like for instance, with Recognize, with our platform, we're posting recognitions automatically to Microsoft Teams, for instance. And then if I want to send a recognition, I just click Recognize. I can do this on the phone or the desktop. It launches me into my profile where, for instance, I can go see my team's recognitions or individuals. I can go and celebrate people's anniversaries. And if I go into someone's profile, I can then get an overview of them from an analytics perspective, right? To get used this for, let's say, performance review. And then, of course, being able to redeem rewards. And it's nice to be able to do it all within your workflow. I can get a gift card. I can buy a live event ticket. I can get some swag. Using the points I've earned from completing wellness challenges, recognitions, trainings, and possibly recognizing other people as well, can all earn points in the system. So that's just a little bit about being able to have a recognition program where it's a third party off the shelf. You can get started in a month. So that's what we do as a business. But you can be doing a lot of these things completely on your own, and you want to be, regardless of whether you use a third party or not, you want to be able to follow a motivation model of SAPS, right? So status, access, power, and stuff is what SAPS stands for. So things like letting a high performer choose the next project to approach, right? Ownership over a ultimate signal, right? A signal of a project that can lead to some kind of new product within the organization. Power to make a decision, right? Mentor, being able to assign a budget for a conference, right? So you are investing in someone's development when they've shown to be a leader through recognition, through achievements. Access, right? Access to a conference, maybe a leadership summit, right? So these are examples of access. And then, of course, stuff. So that's where the gift cards and the concert tickets come in, the experiences. And these are all ways you can motivate people. And you can do this, obviously, on your own. A lot of companies just simply do a gift card on occasion, which is totally fine. That's great. But you can also, if you can, offer other things like swag, or concert tickets, or maybe there's a business in your local area that you can have a relationship with, a nice restaurant, to be able to offer additional different types of rewards. Now, let's see, let's see if there's anything else there. No. Okay, another thing to mention, another best practice is that recovery time. So have you ever felt like, oh my gosh, I'm burnt out, right? And being burnt out is when either you are just go nonstop, and then the other side is when you just never have any success, right? You're just doing something over and over and over, and nothing ever happens. It leads to burnout. So it can help is that breathing, those breaks, right? Where you can have more intense sprints. We talked about sprints in our last webinar. A sprint is basically a amount of work, right? So it could be 1 week or 2 weeks. And then you have a time of maybe some more relaxed tasks. So you shouldn't have a culture. The number one thing I hear about burnout, by the way, is just understaffed. People are understaffed. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. But if you can work it in so that there's kind of an ebbs and flow of work, we're only human, right? I talk to my friends who are doctors. Some of them are seeing over 20 patients in a 10 or 12-hour shift. So FYI, schedule those appointments when they're starting their shift. That cannot be sustainable, right? We have to do things where we provide recovery, and being a manager is really to be productive. It's actually softer things like this. This is how you create a high-performing team, is by allowing there to be that period where everything's not so intense. And you want to watch for that, right? You want to watch for that intensity. And other things you want to do is you want to watch for people who are always the go-to person for that. There's this kind of paradox where if somebody continues to be a really high performer, you keep putting more and more tasks on them. right? And then we burn them out, right? We're burning out our high performers. We need to create equity in that effort. You can't have an employee who, we'll talk more about a case study, but you want to avoid one employee complaining about how they don't, they work too hard and they really don't have a lot going on. Whereas you got someone else who never complains, but they're working on weekends, or they're working nights. You gotta work on that. That's something to pay attention to in that weekly cadence as a manager. So be good to now do a little exercise together as we're kind of coming to an end here. I love to do if you think about it, a lot of these things are theoretical, right? And I know from doing schooling, like, in my physics class, right? We talk about all these theories, these equations. Okay, great. Okay, now apply them. Oh, okay, now I got to really think about this. So I think I love to apply things. I think we should do this with their managers too. Let's walk through some live situations, right? They are just thought experiments, but then it really gets people to think and how to use tools, right? Like prioritize ruthlessly or redistribute, communicate up, plan recovery, right? So I have a scenario that we came up with, and I'd love to give it out to the community to think about, either chime in on the chat or just think about it silently on your own or share with the team. But here's an example, right? So your team has a major deliverable due in 2 weeks. A key member just flagged that they're overwhelmed. Another's working weekends without being asked. Morale is slipping, but the deadline is firm. So what would you do in that situation? How would you handle that? You want to obviously hit that deliverable in 2 weeks, but you're having some morale issues. And it sounds like there's a team member who's overwhelmed, another one's working weekends. What would you do? So we'll have to share what people think they would do in this scenario, and gave a couple ideas here on a possible framework. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say that, like Christina said, that maybe the tasks aren't evenly spread out. Having a meeting, get together and talk to people about the group as a whole, to see where everyone's at, talk to people individually. A lot about being a manager is being a bit of a group therapist, like a couples therapist, where you meet with each couple individually, and then you get together. People, everyone needs to pull their weight, right? And that's what we create those standards of what kind of workload should be expected and what kind of deliverables are expected, and how we talk about that should be standardized. Again, we want to be allies. We want to set examples. Another value of ours is to be a futurist. So if your things aren't going the way you should, what things can you do maybe with AI or delegating to be more effective? Yeah, I think it's a good one from David. Thanks for chiming in. 2 weeks is hard to steer the ship. So just complete the task and then reevaluate what to do next. Awesome, getting some more chiming in here. Erica, we have used the prioritize ruthlessly with some success. Okay, that's good. I mean, sure, not everything always works. Every tool works in every situation, right? Amanda, provide encouragement, recognition, reminder of why, and share the recovery period or celebration. Add it to the calendar for a visible cue. For when it's done. I love that. Great idea. A number of things you can do there to celebrate, but also have that recovery as part of it. All these things are good ideas. There's this great book called Compelling People, and talks about warmth and strength. I think that's a great concept, where you come in with warmth, but then you're strong, right? Like, I remember on a yoga retreat, my friend Kyra was doing food for it, and she said, I really hope everyone loved their meals, and when you're done, please put your plates in the bucket, right? So she was warm, but then she said what was going to happen next, right? So I think that's really a great way to communicate with the team, and just let everyone know that you're there for them, right? And then I think a big one, another one from Compelling People is, are you in the same circle? Are we all on the same page of what needs to get done, what we're trying to accomplish? And we make sure that we don't, we make sure that we see the forest for the trees. All right. So I think what I want to do in these webinars is inspire people but also at the same time, take one thing away that you can do. So I think in the next 24 hours, it's really easy to, be honest with yourself. What is one meeting that maybe you don't necessarily kill it, but maybe you reduce the amount of time you spend in that meeting, or encourage upfront effort, right? I know Jeff Bezos is famous for creating materials, or other people create materials, and then you spend the first part of the meeting reading the materials. And then everyone's on the same page, because people are often busy and they don't have time to read the materials. But then it allows everyone to get on the same page quickly without having to do a whole presentation on just the initial concept of what the meeting's about. Because we want meetings to be productive, and 70% of managers are saying meetings aren't productive. Another one is really training people to not just click send. In my text messaging on my Slack, I can have it go out the next day. And especially for time zones. So if it's 9 p.m. here in Seattle, 10, 11, 12, it's midnight in New York. So I gotta be careful about when I send them messages or call people. Learning to say no to things, right? I think is another good one to try to do, without encouraging people to be pessimistic, obviously. So take one thing away you can do in the next 24 hours. And with that, thank you everyone for coming. We have another webinar I think next week or the week after, next week on Thursday, March 12th. Looking forward to having everyone come to that. This one's a bit more specific in manufacturing teams. So if you're in a manufacturing industry, please come to that. Otherwise, we're having webinars almost every week on these types of topics. We are also doing a live demo of Recognize. So I gave a taste of what Recognize does for recognition and rewards. And we're doing a live demo with my team. I won't be there, but my team will be on March 25th. So please come to that. And you can register with that. And I'm also going to share this with everyone after the call, our team is. So you can take this presentation, cut out the parts that maybe are specific to me, and then show it to your managers. Teach your managers how to be effective, how to create high-performing teams without being burned out. It's been so great to have everyone here. Big turnout. I really appreciate everyone here. You were all obviously dedicated to motivation and helping people be most effective. I love that. So thanks everyone for coming, and reach out. Love to meet you all. Thanks, everybody. Bye. There we go. Okay. See you soon, everybody. Bye.